Hello everyone, welcome back. We're talking about parallel construction today, probably the most commonly tested rule within sentence correction. So pay attention and let's get started. The first thing that we need to know before we can think about mastering parallel construction is the reason it's brought into a sentence. If we don't know the reason, how are we going to spot it in a sentence, right? So the purpose of parallelism is to bring more than one of any element in a sentence. We've talked about this when it comes to understanding a sentence. If I have more than one subject, more than one verb, more than one object, more than one modifier, more than one of anything, I need to adhere to certain structures which are encapsulated as parallel construction, right? Imagine that a sentence is very long, which usually sentences are when it comes to a good level of writing. Whether it's business writing or even just questions within GMAT, the sentences are long. Now, in long sentences, if I have multiple verbs, for example, I need to make sure that all those verbs agree with the number of the subject, which is called subject-verb agreement. I need to make sure it is maintained throughout the sentence. But how do I do that without a syntax? My meaning, my understanding might be able to guide me at times, but there needs to be some framework, some rule that can make sure that if I start a sentence with Harry plays chess, then later, after a bunch of modifiers, I can have and watches movies. I can't have Harry plays chess and watch movies. It's a very simple example of how the verb needs to agree with the subject, right? And these rules, when I have multiple verbs or multiple subjects or multiple objects, certain rules need to be adhered to. The meaning has to be right, the number has to be right, and parallel construction does that job. So it starts with multiple must exist, and as long as I can break that sentence by taking some part of it as common and attaching it to each of the multiple parts, parallel construction is maintained. For example, let's look at a sentence. I have Harry plays chess as the first part of the sentence, right? This in itself would be complete. Harry plays chess is a complete sentence. But in case I need to add more, I'm giving you 5 options. Pause the video, take a minute and think about which of these is right and which of these is wrong. Multiple could be correct, so there's no limitations. Pause, check, we'll start again then. Right, so Harry plays chess and learns magic is obviously correct. I think all of us would have spotted that. And the logic behind that is, if I was to simply take, give me 1 second, if I was to simply take Harry as common, and then these two parts as two separate entities, right? Harry plays chess and learns magic as separate entities, and I attach them. Let's say I call this X. Then XA is a complete sentence, and XB is a complete sentence, where the entire sentence would be represented as X bracket A plus B. Looks familiar, right? We've learned about this in math. This is parallel construction for you, overall at the most advanced of levels as well. If I break the sentence by keeping one part as common, then the individual sentences should be complete grammatically and by meaning. That is parallel construction. Let's look at that in action with this. Let's call this C. XA would obviously be complete. Harry plays chess. Harry is learning magic. That's a complete sentence, so this is correct as well. Now many would say that tense has to play a role here, and it does. It's just that it's correct. Tense is a meaning-based construct. Tense is not purely grammatical. In some cases it is. But in parallel construction, tenses are meaning-based. As long as the meaning makes sense, we won't let tense play a role in deciding parallel construction. So for example, if I change this to are learning magic, the sentence would be wrong because Harry and are wouldn't fit by meaning, by subject-verb agreement. But the tense itself is not enough in case someone was thinking about it. Then, moving on to the third one, let's call this one D. Harry plays chess, obviously is the complete sentence, XA, and Harry will learn magic is again a complete sentence, correct for me. Now looking at the fourth one, see how this sentence should also be correct, but I'm not keeping Harry as common anymore. Here my structure would change. Here I would have Harry plays as common. Let's call this Z. And I have chess as, let's say, M, and then I have Quidditch as, let's say, N. Now Z bracket M plus N would be the sentence that should break into Zm plus Zn. Harry plays chess, Harry plays Quidditch. Harry plays Quidditch is a complete sentence, Harry plays chess is a complete sentence, this is also correct. It's just that the parts that are taken common are different. And this is what we need to master to become good at sentence, parallel construction, pardon me. We need to know where to break the sentences in open structures. There are two types of structures, we'll get into all of that. But at the crux of it all, it's about breaking the sentence, finding where to break it from. Yeah? Finally, can I, in any form, make this parallel? Even though I have just a noun here and just a noun here, I can't. Because if I break it as Z, Harry plays magic would not make sense. If I break it as just from Harry, it wouldn't make sense because then Harry magic would not be a complete sentence. In both those cases, the sentence would not fit, and this is what is incorrect. The rest all of them are correct. Right? Once again, can I break the sentences into two sentences with the same overlapping words? The same overlapping words being either Harry plays or Harry, depending on the meaning. If that can be done, parallel construction is solid. But I'm sure that at least some of you are thinking, I will not be able to do this in the paper, at least not in 1 minute, right? Obviously, because the sentences would be tougher, much more complicated. So at least for the easy questions in parallel construction, I must have an alternative way to go about this. And that alternative is this 4-step method. First things first, you need to identify a structure because a structure tells us that parallel construction has in fact been used. In the absence of a structure, there is no parallel construction. Structures are pointers, right? Specific words, like in the last sentence, it was the word and. This word and tells me that there is parallel construction. And there are other structures, not only but also. I'll give you the most common ones here, and from there we can obviously learn as we solve more and more questions. Now, once you've spotted the structure, you want to identify the primary elements, meaning what are the elements that are being made parallel. In terms of certain structures, it will be very easy to do. The structure itself will tell you what the primary elements are. In other cases like and, you will have to understand the sentence and then figure out what should be the primary elements. Once you do that, it's about similarity, right? In the sense, if I look at the last one again, I can make a verb parallel with a verb, but I cannot make a noun parallel with a verb, for example. Or I cannot make a modifier parallel with a verb. So for example, Harry plays chess and which is a good game. Won't be parallel. If I simply add as a sixth option, which is a good game. It is, isn't it? For all the chess lovers out there. So this will be complete because this is a modifier and this is a verb. This is a noun. I don't have any modifier that I can make this parallel with. The sentence is incorrect. So are they similar is the next question. That's step 3. Once we're done with that, we move on to the final step, which is does the meaning make sense? And that was highlighted by option 5 here, where everything else fits. The structure is and, the internal portions are chess and magic. Chess is a noun, magic is a noun, so it should be parallel, but at the end of it all, the meaning doesn't fit because you can't play magic. That is it. From the simplest of questions to the toughest of questions, this is it. You don't have to apply a 5th step. Okay? Now, the structures. We need to be able to identify them so that we can apply to them, right? These are the most common ones. There are other structures as well, of course, but as you solve questions, you run into those exceptions. There aren't too many. So make sure that you absolutely by heart these, right? This should be something that just stands out to you every time you look at a sentence correction question. Now, the structures do 3 jobs, and this is now meaning based. So when you're reading a sentence, you might have to decide based on meaning. And in that case, know that the first bracket just works by joining 2. So Harry plays chess, and Quidditch tells us that chess and Quidditch are 2 entities, both of which can be played. So they're coming together. When you compare it, essentially what's larger, what's smaller, what's faster, what's slower, easy enough to make sense, within which the most common structure is the ER form plus than. And this is one of the trickier parallel constructions to apply. We will be discussing this in a completely separate video because it's common. You're more likely, at least every second person will get a question based on the ER form plus than. So we want to make sure that we understand this and how it is applied perfectly, right? Now, of course, the ER form is a comparative added to any adjective. So it could be large turning to larger, it could be small turning to smaller, it could be fast turning to faster, it could be great turning to greater. Any adjective with an ER form becomes a comparative, right? With exceptions, more often than not. And now this as fast as slow as is again as plus an adjective plus an as. And that again becomes a comparative, right? You can use any adjective in the middle. Great, powerful, use what you want to here as an adjective, right? And again becomes a comparative parallel construction. The two entities here should be comparable. We should be able to break the sentence. All of the general rules apply. Choosing as it makes sense again, right? We've got two entities. We want to pick one of them. For those we use these structures, or neither of them, again we use that structure. Now, taking this further, how do we apply these structures? For that, we need to start by understanding that there are actually two types of structures. We have one which is a closed structure, such as not only but also, neither nor. How does a structure become closed? It has 2 pointers. Not only tells me where the parallel construction begins, but also tells me what's the last entity of the parallel construction. So the two important parts of the PC are pointed out by the structure itself. If you remember, when we talked about the 4 steps, we said what were the primary elements, right? In closed structures, the primary elements are highlighted by the structure itself, which means all I have to do is look at the first word after not only and the first word after but also, and we're done. Nothing else needs to be done. It's the open structures such as and that can be confusing, right? So open structures, now how do they function? They essentially give you a lot of flexibility. As we saw with the example sentence that we worked with, we had the possibility of the parallel construction starting from place, starting from chess. That's because and is an open structure. It remains flexible. And these would be the structures where meaning would play a much greater role, or where complications could come in. Let's look at how we solve for both of these structures, right? So let's say it's a closed structure. If I look at the first sentence, if I get this as a question in the paper, all I'm doing is I see the word not only, so I focus on the first word after not only, and I focus on the first word after but also, and I see if they're similar. I have plays here, I have learns here, verb, singular form. I quickly check the meaning. Harry plays Quidditch, Harry learns magic, the sentence is correct. I'm done. I don't need to think about anything else. Where else the parallel construction is at is not a possibility, because it has to exist in this region, closed structures. Similarly, for the second one, after not only I have the word Quidditch, which is a sport, after but also I have the words wizard chess, which is again a sport. Harry can play both of them, the sentence is correct. I'm done. I'm using not only as my first pointer, but also as my second pointer, and that's it. Checking that they're similar, checking that the meaning fits, done. Third one, first word after not only plays, which is a verb, singular form, after but also I have a noun, this is incorrect. There is no universe in which this can be parallel. I don't have to check meaning as well. I look at the last one, neither nor is another structure, so of course this works with all closed structures. I have Quidditch, a noun, I have learns, a verb, this cannot be correct, and eliminated. And I'm done. For example, if I was to correct the fourth one, just to make sure there are no doubts, I can write Harry neither plays Quidditch, I'm denoting that with a Q, nor learns magic. And this sentence, denoting that with an M, magic with an M, this sentence is correct. Because after neither, I have a singular verb, after nor, I have a singular verb. Harry plays Quidditch, Harry learns magic, can be broken down to complete sentences. Correct. Closed structures should be very easy for you, right? And this is what I would recommend that you start practicing parallel construction with. Create sentences, as many as you can, with as many closed structures as you can, and then look at how they could go wrong. Spend time doing that before you go into questions. Master this idea, right? Before you go into open structures either. This can be a good net practice for the real questions, quote unquote. And that brings us to open structures. So obviously, I look at this question in the paper, I spot the and that tells me parallel construction must be applied. Now when I'm reading through this, I need to keep thinking about where the sentence could be broken, which can be helped by spotting the word after and. I don't have 2 pointers as I do in closed structures, but I have at least one. So this must play a role. So now that I have a singular verb, I'll check the singular verb here. In the sentence, I'll look for the verb. Harry plays Quidditch, which means since I have learns here, it must be breaking here. Once again, in an open structure, there's only one pointer, so I use that pointer. Whatever comes after must match something before it, something before the word and. Since this is a verb, it can only match a verb, so I'll keep my focus on verbs. I only have one here, so let's break the sentence from there. Harry plays Quidditch, complete. Harry learns magic, complete. The sentence is complete. Moving to the second one. I see the and, I look at what comes after it. It's visit chess, which is a noun. So I look for the nouns. I have Quidditch and I have Harry. Obviously can't break it from Harry because visit chess in itself would not be complete, so it must be broken through Quidditch. Harry plays Quidditch, complete. Harry plays visit chess, complete. And I have another correct sentence. Looking at the third one, and I have learning, which could be a gerund, which could be one of the 4 forms of ing, which we'll talk about in a separate video, but it's an ing form. So I'm looking for an ing form before this. I have none. This can't be correct. Done. Yeah? Now, to see what we have to aim for, when we get this question in the exam, we're not going to get sentences that are 6, 7, 8 words, right? We're going to get a sentence like this. How do you solve something like this? As you're reading this and should stand out. But you won't be able to use it if you cannot get rid of modifiers here. M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. Look at how much we've already eliminated. Now I have Harry learns magic and plays Quidditch. I'm back to this form. We talked about this in the first video about sentence correction, understanding a sentence. You have to be able to simplify sentences. Once you do that, you get to this point. And this point isn't very difficult to master, right? See how all of this works together? That's what we're aiming for. Yeah. Now in the next video, I'm going to be talking about modifiers so that we can become good at identifying them. For now, let's look at a question. So if you get this question in the paper, the method tells us that we start with the first words. We have will occupy versus to occupy versus they will occupy. Why did I go to the word occupy? Because this is a verb and we know that there are 3 important parts in a sentence: subject, verb and object. So verbs will always be the most important part for me. If you're not good at identifying verbs, you have to become good at it, because if you can't identify these important constituents, it will always be difficult to work with rules even when you know them, right? So we want to become good at identifying verbs. First, practice with simpler sentences, move to tougher ones slowly. I would read easier books and spot verbs there and have your study partner to discuss with. Wren and Martin is also a wonderful source to work on the same. Now, knowing that there are these separate parts, let's try to read the sentence and figure out how it would work. In build-to-suit projects, this is a modifier. I will be pointing out these modifiers and parallel constructions here so you can practice as well. Developers design and construct buildings. I have my subject, I have my verbs, plural, and I have my object. To meet, this is a modifier. Again, the needs of a primary tenant. Who pays? This will be another modifier. Who pays the developer marginal fee for design and construction work? This is another parallel construction. And agrees, parallel construction again. So this agrees must be parallel with pays. There's only one verb, pardon me. Who pays and agrees to buy the completed building, or another parallel construction, right? So I have one parallel construction ending here because and comes in here, and then there's another parallel construction here which will work with the verb occupy, right? So since occupy is a verb, I'm looking for another verb. Where do I have it? By. The only problem though is this by has a preposition attached to it. So if I break it from the word to, I get and agrees to will occupy, which will not fit. So I cannot have the A or B forms. If I take the to in, I get agrees will buy, which again will occupy, which again will not make sense. So A and B, the will occupy form, in both cases would naturally become incorrect. C, the to and the to here match, and by meaning as well, and agrees to buy and agrees to occupy. Both of those make sense. I keep this alive. Looking at D, if I break it at the word to, it makes sense. Agrees to occupy. I don't like it because it creates a little bit of confusion for me with the experience I have of solving, but it still looks parallel, so I'll keep it alive for parallel construction. Again, the they has to be incorrect simply because, well, there's nothing plural here. The tenant is singular, so the they can't really point to anything. I'm going to clean this up a little bit so we can discuss between C and D. I have 2 occupy versus occupy. Let's say this part is the same because I've checked parallel construction, and let's read ahead. All of it or most. Now, the difference here is where the of it is coming in, right? If the of it comes at the end, and notice that this is also parallel construction, if it comes here, then I can break these 2 parts and get the of it attached to both of them, right? To occupy all of it, to occupy most of it. But if I bring the of it here, I get occupy all of it or most, and it ends there. Whereas I want most of it here as well, right? Because I'm talking about the construction work or the building here. So this of it, your listening skills would be telling you that already, and that is enough. But in case it isn't, this is also parallel construction. I need the of it to come at the very end. So for 2 reasons, for me, the 2 should be here for simplicity. If that doesn't work, by grammar, of it has to come at the end, and that makes C my answer, and I'm done. In the paper, this should be maybe 45 seconds tops. You come here, you see will occupy versus to occupy versus they will occupy. The they, there's nothing plural, is out. I check parallel construction. What would it be parallel with? With the to form, it should be C. Done. We're done. That's how the execution should work in the paper. For now, we're practicing, so we'll look at all the causalities and all the logic behind it. Let's look at a slightly tougher one now, right? Going by our methodology to solve, we'd like to look at the first words and last words, right? So we have an expanding cloud of energized particles, the same here, and a large storm. Let's see if we can decide, according to scientists who monitored its path. It could be the cloud, it could be the storm. I can't be sure, so this does not give me any eliminations. Let me see if the last words can. I have and also possibly knocking, which is not a structure, so let's get rid of 2 at least. It's A and B, not A and also B. Redundancy. This is called redundancy. The structure does not exist. Looking at C, and possibly knocking, and it possibly knocked, and it possibly knocked. That's parallel construction. Let's check parallel construction. Let's say C, an expanding cloud of energized particles ejected from the sun recently triggered a large storm in the magnetic field that surrounds Earth, brightening the northern lights and possibly knocking. So this knocking can be parallel with brightening. If you're asking about the word possibly, this is a modifier attached to my main constituent. This is what is at the crux of my parallel construction, and I'm only modifying it. Good with me. I can always ignore modifiers. So brightening, knocking seems okay. Let's look at D. A large storm in the magnetic field that surrounds Earth, recently triggered by an expanding cloud of energized particles, brightened the northern lights, and it possibly knocked. This is redundant, isn't it? And you can keep this as a rule. The and it form 9 out of 10 times is incorrect. There are certain cases where it would be right. If you understand that, great, but if you're stuck in the exam and this does come out to you, use it, right? It's redundant because it beats the purpose of parallel construction, right? The point of parallel construction is so that I don't have to repeat the same things again and again. So here the large storm is the focus. I'm using and so that this remains the subject and I can bring in multiple verbs. If I have to bring in a pronoun for it anyway, what's the point of PC? The sentence remains the same length. That's why the and it form is usually wrong. That is also redundancy. And that's D. The same would work for E, but I will have to check. A large storm in the magnetic field surrounding Earth was recently triggered by expanding cloud of energized particles, brightening the other lights, and it possibly knocked. Here we have another problem. If anything, it should also be an ing form. So E is also out, and C is my answer. Done. Now this was the 600 to 700 level question, I think. And now we look at a 700 to 800. Pause the video, take a minute if you want, and I don't put pressure on yourself to get it right, but let's see, try your best. Let's see, again, I look at the first words, I see of his right to remain silent versus that he had to remain silent, 2 different forms. Let's check. The suspect in the burglary was advised, it's advised of something, it's not advised that usually, but grammatically acceptable to me. Since I'm not 100% sure, I won't eliminate the option. Reading ahead, any 2 options, let's say A and B. I could also check the last words though, and at the last words I see the word and, which gives me parallel construction. So let's check PC. The suspect in the burglary was advised of his right to remain silent, told, so told needs to be parallel with advised, and was interrogated. So in the burglary, the suspect in the burglary was advised of something. The suspect in the burglary Was told, right? The suspect in the burglary told he could not leave would not make sense here, right? So I know that my parallel construction has to break from here. There's one element, there's second element, there's third element. The only way this makes sense is if I break from here, which means for this as well, the break should come after was. So this is redundant and that's A eliminated. Looking at B, the suspect in the burglary was advised of his right to remain silent, told again the same thing, right? Has to break from was, and in this case, interrogated fits it. The suspect in the burglary was interrogated in a detention room, was told he could not leave, was advised of his right. Good, I'll keep it alive. See, the suspect in the burglary was advised of his right to remain silent and that he could not leave, and so there's two ands to join three things redundant again. I can write A, B and C. What is the point behind writing A and B and C? None. Let's see out. Looking at D. Was advised that he had a right to remain silent. Okay. Could not leave. Okay. Was advised that he could not leave. So it has to break from here. No other structure would make sense. The suspect in the burglary was advised that he could not leave. I can't write that he could not leave, pardon me, not just the word that. Was advised that he could not leave. So it has to break after the word he. And then I have this starting from was. So that would mean the suspect in the burglary was advised that he was interrogated in a detention room. Doesn't make sense, right? He was advised that he was interrogated. Eliminated. Suspect in the burglary was advised that he had a right to remain silent. Good. That he could not leave. So it's breaking from advised here. I'm repeating the word that. And then I have the suspect in the burglary was advised was interrogated in a detention room. So the was is repeated here. I've already checked that it breaks from the word was. Pardon me, breaks from the word advised. So here the was would become redundant and that's E eliminated as well. B's the answer. Done. That's parallel construction for us. You want to practice with 500 to 600? If you're good at spotting verbs and nouns already and the meaning already. If not, you want to work on that first, which is understanding a sentence. And raise your levels slowly. Keep breaking sentences down by meaning, by structure. And this should be something that you're perfect at. Because this is one of the founding pillars of not just sentence correction, but all three sections. You need this for CR and RC as well, at least for understanding. And well, if you have any questions, of course, approach. I'm always here. Like and subscribe so more and more people can get to know about this. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.